So the next thing that keeps us from concentrating when we're trying to do the visualization and the mantra is dullness and drowsiness. Okay. So, you know, on a very gross level, we find ourselves nodding off, and, you know, suddenly kind of white Tara is morphing into, you know how you start to fall asleep and then you get these different images and things. So she's morphing into something else, and, you know, okay. Or, so that's on a very gross level, which is the first level we have to deal with. And so there, if you're having trouble falling asleep, try doing lots of prostrations before you sit down, you know, because the physical activity is good, and also doing confession and purification counteracts some of the negativities that have the function of making us drowsy and dull. Okay? Another thing to do is to put cold water on your face to check your meditation posture and make sure your back's straight, you know, and that your arms, there's some space here, and your head is level, you know. So really check your posture. Try and make your visualization very bright. Yeah, like really brighten everything up. It's, of course, it's what you don't want to do when you're falling asleep, which is why it's the antidote, you know, is you try and brighten it up so you can think of the light as just really bright, you know, coming into you. Or you can think of inhaling very bright light that really, you know, kind of wakes you up. Recognize that falling asleep does not necessarily mean that you lack sleep, okay? Because we can be wide awake 1 minute when we have when we're fantasizing and daydreaming, and asleep the next minute. And as soon as that fantasy comes back, we're wide awake again. And it has nothing to do with how many hours of sleep we had the night before, right? And when you're angry, when you're distracted by ill will and maliciousness, you don't get drowsy then, do you? You know, we're wide awake plotting our revenge. So you can see that, you know, the drowsiness is more a way in which our mind manifests resistance to meditation. Okay, so we have lots of resistance, and falling asleep is one of them. And it's a sneaky one because we can always say, oh, well, that's because I didn't sleep enough, so I better skip session and sleep some more. So it's very sneaky that way, okay? So we should really take care. Don't wear so many heavy clothes, or sit in a really warm room, or wrap yourself up in blankets. That's going to foster the sleepiness. Yeah, you want to be a little bit cool. And if you're cool, it helps you to stay awake. Okay? So that's like a very gross kind of falling asleep and drowsiness. But then there's also a subtler kind of lethargy or laxity where your mind is, well, the lethargy is your mind is kind of on the object, but kind of not. Okay? It's like the mind is lagging behind speed. You're going through the sadhana, and the mind is, you're reading what you're reading, but you're still somewhere behind, okay? And then the laxity is even more subtle, because there you might even be on the object meditation, but it's not very vital, it's not very intense. your clarity of the object is kind of, not so much there. So you need to be aware of all these kinds of ways in which the mind tunes out by this foggy kind of obscuration. Okay? Yeah, and then brighten your mind up. One way to brighten your mind up is to think of precious human life, to think of the three jewels, to think of Buddha nature, so something that your mind finds uplifting will, make you more interested in the meditation and less likely to get lethargic during it. Okay, so try that. And keep working with it, yeah? Don't get discouraged if you go through a period of, where you're falling asleep a lot or drowsy or lethargic or lax or whatever. But keep working at it, become aware of it, apply the antidotes. I think it's very important in this way to make sure you get exercise, And one reason that we chose this site for the Abbey is because of the view, because it's so important when you're doing meditation that you look at the long view, okay? Because that expands your mind, whereas, dullness and so forth, they're making your mind kind of inward, kind of contracted. So you want to look at long distances, look across the hills, look at the empty sky. Get outside and walk. Do some yoga. Do some stretching. Okay? Now I know you've all heard me say this many times before, but how much do we actually do it? Yeah? So that's one reason that it gets said again and again, maybe because one time we'll think to try it. Yeah? But it's actually quite helpful. And keeping your mind happy, keeping that happy mind, precious human life, refuge, Buddha nature, generating bodhicitta so you have a loving mind that really wants to benefit sentient beings. Then all of that can really wake you up. Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering about when you spoke about lethargy, you're kind of on the object, kind of not, and I've experienced a lot of that. But it seems like there's that sense of dullness, but then the part of my mind that's not on the object is also dealing with excitement or desire. So which antidotes do you apply?
Okay. Well, when your mind's not on the object and there's distraction and desire, then especially with desire, then you're going to use the antidote of impermanence and seeing the defects of cyclic existence. Okay, but if your mind is just lethargic and heavy and dull, that's when you would use the more uplifting meditations. Okay, because sometimes your mind can lag behind because you're going off in another direction, but that's different than if it's lagging behind just because it's kind of dull and you're kind of spacey.